Are you looking at this from an exponential perspective? Are you missing the big picture here? Because we're human. Our DNA is literally programmed to think in a linear fashion. To us, on a day-to-day basis, life really doesn't change that much. But that's not true with technological advancement. And it changes much more quickly than even experts will realize.
Writing checks to angel investors, I mean, that's a skill in itself. It probably puts you way ahead of the curve of guys that are just out there analyzing stocks and, reading all the usual reports. Is that a fair assessment of kind of where your skills lie?
As an executive, I've literally sold billions of dollars worth of technology into the markets around the world for US and European companies. When you're customer facing, when you understand how a product has to be packaged, how it needs to be positioned, how it's sold, it provided me some of the most valuable insights I could possibly have as an investment analyst.
You made a comparison kind of in the medical industry where, as opposed to going to my doctor, I might go to like an AI doctor. Explain how that might work.
It is one of the most exciting technological developments in our lifetime. We can think of it as a tool to correct mutations in our DNA. If we can imagine taking the finest doctors on the planet, all of them, and then encapsulating that as an artificial general intelligence, which has the world's medical knowledge, it understands every single research paper that's ever been written, that would change our healthcare and the quality of our outcomes dramatically. And that's the doctor, honestly, I want to see if something's wrong.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs, sharing our vulnerability, overcoming our fears, transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jeff Brown, the high technology executive, investment analyst, and angel investor who has spent 25 years working for some of the greatest technology companies in the world. You graduated with a degree in aeronautical and astronautical engineering from Purdue University before earning your master's degree in management from the London Business School right here. You also hold certificates from MIT, Stanford, and Yale University's School of Management. In 2015, you profiled Bitcoin when it was trading for less than $250. And last year, you founded Brownstone Research, a boutique investment firm that delivers executive-level investment research to all who seek it. Jeff, welcome to London Real.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be here with you.
Hey, it's great to have you here. I just wanted to let people know that we've just actually finished recording a separate video that's not going to be on YouTube. It's not going to be on social media. It's not even going to be on our website. And it's all about your private briefing on something called timed stocks. And we've actually just outlined a way that you could make at least $74,000 by investing in 3 biotech trends over the coming weeks. And I don't want to give it away, but it might involve things like quantum computing, artificial general intelligence, and maybe even CRISPR technologies. So if you want to watch that video, it's available exclusively to London Real viewers, and it's over at londonreal.tv/Jeff if you want to go check that out. You know, Jeff, you've been massively successful, and I think it's because possibly you have this marriage of technology and business and finance. And, you know, it's something that I was lucky enough to kind of have a similar path. I graduated from MIT in '93 with a mechanical engineering degree, but a lot of people don't know I spent the last 2 years over at Sloan School of Business learning about options pricing, stock trading, and I went straight to Wall Street after that. I spent 10 years in the city of London here, and I must say that I looked at everything through a different lens. And I'm curious, you know, you spent time here in London at the London Business School, but you also came from that hardcore tech. And let me just say, folks, if you're an aeronautical engineer, like that's real stuff. You know, these people know the details, fluid dynamics, it's like real stuff. How did you find, you know, having both of those tools in your arsenal? Do you think that's what's given you the edge over the years?
Oh, absolutely. It was one of the smartest things for me to do was to do my undergraduate work at a school like Purdue in aeronautical and astronautical engineering. And to your point, fluid dynamics, propulsion, some people like to call it rocket science, orbital mechanics, structural analysis, all of these tools have been immensely useful to me in my career in terms of understanding how technology works. I started off as an engineer and then migrated over to the business side, which is what prompted me to decide to go to the London Business School. And in particular, I focused on corporate finance. I really wanted to understand, particularly, especially as an investor, I've been an investor since I was 16 years old, I wanted to understand how assets were valued. And I think this is one of the most critical aspects of being successful as an investor is understanding the value, not the share price, but the value of the underlying asset and whether or not we're investing at a good, reasonable, fair valuation or if we're investing in a grossly overvalued asset. And the time that I spent in London working on that developed an amazing skill set in terms of what I do now, which is an investment analyst. And that helps me and my subscribers make a lot of money.
And one thing I just noticed is you also got that international experience. I guess I do as well. And, you know, that must have also changed the game, you know, just to be living in a different place, different markets, different ideas. I mean, you spent a couple of years here in London, I think from 03 to 04. What was that like?
It was the absolute best thing I could have ever done was to get outside of the United States. And I first moved to Tokyo, Japan in 1997. And I spent the better part of 2 decades. Most of my adult life, in fact, has been spent living and working overseas. And I've done work in business in 65 different countries around the world. I've had global positions where I was really leading an overall business unit in business development. Probably the best thing we can do in terms of personal development is to spend several years living and working in a country that's vastly different than our own. It just helps expand our worldview and think differently. It certainly helped with my creative thinking and to look at companies, technologies, people, cultures from entirely different perspectives.
And what are your fondest memories of London?
Oh, pints of good beer at the local pub, definitely. No, I had an absolute blast at the London Business School. Being right in central London, absolutely the finest teachers that I could, dream of being able to spend such quality time with in terms of corporate finance. I think they're the best in the world. I love the parks. My wife and I tended to, walk through the parks on the weekends, and we even enjoyed the ballet and opera, also within walking distance. It's an extraordinary city. It really is.
Yeah, no, I love it. I actually first moved over here for work in '97, and it's changed a lot since then and since when you were here as well. I was actually fortunate enough, my mom got me over to Japan back in 1984 when I was a kid. I did a home exchange program, so I saw just a really different culture at a younger age, and it really shakes you up, but it really opens your eyes that the world is a bigger place than just America. And when you're in America, sometimes it's hard to see outside because it's a varied, massive place. But I think that understanding has really helped you a lot, recognizing these trends. And, Jeff, I'm a big fan of your work. You really have that deep knowledge and you have a lot of new ideas I haven't heard from a lot of places. And, we just obviously went pretty deep on some of this stuff, but, a lot of people don't know much about the things that you talk about, or they don't know what they don't know. When it comes to quantum computing, I think I've had 1 or 2 guests on in the last couple of years that have touched on it. People talk about AI, but when you talk about AGI, it's a different level. And then with CRISPR, we've all heard that acronym and, the gene sequencing, but we don't know what that really means or what it means for tech and then for the future. So I don't know, I was wondering if you could talk about, how these things go on your radar and I don't know, maybe just give us a taste of some of the ideas behind this stuff, because I think a lot of people are fascinated.
Absolutely. This is one of the hardest things that I do in terms of my work and my research. Truly one of my secrets is that I get involved very early on. So I literally, on weekends, whenever I have free time, I literally read research reports. So these aren't, company investor presentations. These are literally research reports that are coming out of bleeding edge science. And I track technology from what I like to think of as inception, from the time that these discoveries are being made, because the way that it works is that when a big discovery has been made in research, what tends to happen is that they're licensed, the technology is licensed to corporations. And those are almost always private companies. And companies are often formed around these breakthroughs. And so I follow where the intellectual property goes into these private small companies. And I'm a very active angel investor. I've invested in more than 150 different small early stage tech and biotech companies, which really gives me a lens into what's happening at the very bleeding edge of technological development. These are the things that will become big deals in 5 years. Sometimes, it takes 10 years. But I've got this inside view on how this technology is being commercialized. And I track these private companies for years, and I track the executives. I often speak with them, and I look at the progress that they're making over time, so that when they're getting ready to go public, I already understand the executives, the technology, the company, the series of fundraisings that it's been through. And by the time it hits the public markets, I already know whether it's a fantastic investment or whether it's a poor investment, or whether it's grossly overvalued, or whether nobody knows about it and it's one of the best deals that I've ever seen. And so this is part of my kind of, we can call it my proprietary, research and analysis system. But I really do play the long game. I put a lot of effort in on the front end that only materializes oftentimes years later. But I've built up a tremendous pipeline of research and knowledge and analysis that really comes out every week and every month when I publish investment research.
Wow. Now it makes sense, because when you speak about these technologies and these companies, it does seem like it comes from a deep level of knowledge. It's kind of black belt level, and I think you might have a black belt in something. But when you're around someone seasoned like that, and that it's not just a line that they read on Bloomberg. It's something that they really know a lot about. And like you said, knowing the players behind the scenes, knowing what's going on. And for people that don't know, writing checks to angel investors, that's a skill in itself. You're talking to people who have just an idea, usually not many other people investing them. You're giving them a check. They could literally lose the whole thing, or they could be the next thing, and that's quite a fascinating skill, but it must make you privy to a lot of fascinating information. And even if some of that becomes useful, it probably puts you way ahead of the curve of guys that are just out there analyzing stocks and, reading all the usual reports. Is that a fair assessment of kind of where your skills lie?
Absolutely. I think that's the mistake that a lot of analysts make, is just thinking that, combing through SEC filings or reading investor presentations will somehow provide these insights for good investments. There is so much more to it. I kind of think about investing in early stage companies as kind of the dark arts of investing. It's not a clearly defined skill set. It's something that really has to be learned through doing it. You have to generate a feel for which investments are more likely to be successful over time, to set up your own criteria. We can think of it as kind of a framework for analyzing early stage deals where you can't possibly know all of the variables. I think another one of the perspectives and kind of one of my secrets to success in terms of analysis also is because as an executive, I've literally sold billions of dollars worth of technology into the markets around the world for US and European companies. When you're customer facing, when you understand how a product has to be packaged, how it needs to be positioned, how it's sold, and how technology buyers go through their own process of procurement and analysis and decision-making about which technology to choose, it provided me some of the most valuable insights I could possibly have as an investment analyst, having been on the front line involved in sales and business development and leadership and strategy. These are invaluable skills that have obviously had a defining impact on me as the founder and chief investment analyst of Brownstone Research. It's really one of my secrets.
Yeah, that's some serious deep knowledge. And, I just want to remind everybody, if you want to learn more about exactly what you're talking about in this private briefing on something you're called time stocks, we have recorded a separate video. People can find it at londonmill.tv/Jeff. And it outlines a way that you can make at least $74,000 by investing in 3 biotech trends over the coming weeks, things like quantum computing, artificial general intelligence, and CRISPR. And again, it's exclusive only to London Real viewers. I mean, maybe you can give us a little taste of what some of these things are. Quantum computing, man, back when we got our degrees, I don't remember hearing that phrase. I don't think that was a thing at the time. But now it sounds like it could potentially change the game with multiple orders of magnitude faster. I mean, how would you explain that to the layman? And what are the implications for the future?
Right. Well, when you and I were at school, I'm sure you remember the same. Most of the computing systems were driven off of these large mainframes. You had to get time from the computer lab to work with your code. It was extremely inconvenient, and it took forever for relatively simple programs to run. I remember sleeping overnight in the computer lab just to get my results for the next day. It was truly awful. I'd love to go back to school now for that reason.
Yeah, the computer. I'm getting bad flashbacks to the computer lab, Like it is a place where people sleep all night, and it's one of those places.
I'd love to say they were good memories, but not really. But anyway, today since then we've seen this rapid progression of kind of these traditional von Neumann architecture computing systems that have been keeping pace basically with what's referred to as Moore's law. So the computing power basically doubles every 18 to 24 months. And it's held true, and that's because of the advancements in semiconductor technology. Well, what's been happening in recent years is that Moore's law has been slowing down. We've seen this incredible trajectory, and now it's starting to flatten off. Things are still improving every couple of years by 15, 20%. But we're starting to reach a limit in terms of how tiny we can make these transistors. It'll hold true for several more years, but eventually we're going to reach that cap where it becomes very difficult to continue at that pace. And this is where quantum computing comes in. This is where we see not just an exponential leap, but a real massive jump in computer processing power, because suddenly we go from something that's just improving by 20% a year to something that's just improved 1 million times a year. Just for perspective about what a fully functional user fault tolerant, a universal fault tolerant quantum computer could mean to the world. And so when we think about taking these incredibly powerful computers and focusing them on very complex problems, these problems that have so many variables that our traditional computers just can't process. Those are the types of problems that we have been giving, in fact, to quantum computers. And so when we think about designing new molecular structures or understanding how proteins are folded and how our bodies interact with them, we talked about drug discovery and how that will change with the advent of quantum computing. And what most people are not seeing yet, and what's incredible, is that the functionality of quantum computers is already increasing at an exponential rate. I remember just a few years ago, a quantum computer that had, a few quantum bits, we call them qubits, was a big deal. And then in 2019, when Google achieved quantum supremacy, we had 53 quantum bits. So going from a couple quantum bits to 53 is beyond exponential growth in a very short period of time. And so what we're going to see this year is quantum computers that have more than 100 quantum bits. And then 2022, we'll see several hundred quantum bits. I think you get what I'm getting at is that quantum computers themselves are already growing at an exponential rate, and their ability in terms of computer processing power is far greater than the best supercomputers we have on the planet today.
It makes it, I bet, difficult as a human to imagine 20 years from now what all that technology will lead up to. I mean, even for a guy as smart as you, Jeff, and as technologically, studied as you are, do you ever wonder, like, it's hard for me even to conceive as an organic being what that kind of computing structure could mean to, biotech and all these things? Do you ever think that? I don't know, it just came into my head.
It's absolutely. In fact, one of the techniques that I use with myself literally every day is I ask myself a simple question. Are you thinking exponentially? Because we're human. Our DNA is literally programmed to think in a linear fashion. We think about going through our days in a very linear, scheduled sequence of events, and we think about the things that we need to achieve every day in a very linear fashion. And to us, on a day-to-day basis, life really doesn't change that much. But that's not true with technological advancement. And it changes much more quickly than even experts will realize. It's something that I've noticed when I speak with PhDs around the world, is that they're very focused on their one single area of expertise. I remember having discussions way back in 2016 with people with doctorates in genetics and genetic engineering. And their comments to me were that, we really won't see any therapies based on genetic editing for at least 10 years. And I remember telling them how wrong they were, that in fact, we're going to see, the first successful therapy application of genetic editing on a human within 24 months. And it's because they were so focused that they didn't actually see how fast the entire industry was developing. And you know what? We actually did have a cure for beta thalassemia and sickle cell anemia using CRISPR genetic editing technology within that 24-month time frame. I mean, it was extraordinary. So I remind myself every day when I look at research, or I look at a company, or I look at a product or a service, I think, are you looking at this from an exponential perspective? Are you missing the big picture here?
Yeah, that's so powerful, so powerful. To try to recognize as humans our own blind spots and identify them and then do something about them is very difficult. So I see what you're saying there. I'm going to start asking myself if I'm thinking exponentially. Again, this whole quantum computing is going to be manifested in certain companies and certain stocks that reap the benefits of this. And Jeff's actually going to be doing a live call where he's going to talk about that. And some of these are these time stocks, which is a fascinating phenomenon. Again, link below, londonreal.tv/Jeff. Talk to me about artificial intelligence, because Jeff, if I Google that right now, I'm going to get a bunch of videos, and I've had a lot of guests on my show talk about it. And the general public is AI going to take over the world or not? They don't really seem to go to the next level. And even if I take a step back and think as a consumer, where do I see AI in my life? I mean, I guess I see it with Alexa or something, but I don't feel like it's there to where it actually changes my life. And yet you're talking about AI and this thing called AGI. Again, you're thinking exponentially, I'm not. Where you're saying, no, Brian, this is going to be a reality that's going to change your day-to-day life in maybe years, and the companies that are going to benefit from it. Maybe you can speak on this and try to explain that to people.
This is such an interesting topic, because it is genuinely hard for us to get our heads around, because it's not like a smartphone, right? Because we use it every day. We know how incredible of a technology a smartphone is, and how it makes our life better and easier and more accessible. So we it's tangible. We can literally see it and feel it, and we know what the impact is on our life. Artificial intelligence is one of those things that's in the background, that we often are using it and we don't even realize we use it. You're right. Perfect example that you gave was Alexa, the Amazon Echo it's Google Assistant, it's Cortana from Microsoft. It doesn't matter. There are all sorts of these basically artificial intelligence enabled robots, smart speakers. And they're getting pretty good. We've had some breakthroughs actually in the last 12 months that haven't quite funneled through to the general public. 2021 is going to be a big year. In fact, I believe by the end of this year, we're going to have, we're going to see digital assistants become quite pervasive. So we think about having our own artificial intelligence that understands us deeply and can actually go out and do very valuable tasks for us on our behalf. Or, my assistant can speak with your assistant and actually schedule our next meeting, our call, our session together without us ever having to do anything. Artificial intelligence is actually pervasive in our lives today. So let's take a company like Amazon, which, believe it or not, is one of the largest artificial intelligence companies on the planet. It uses artificial intelligence for all of its logistics networks. So sorting through millions upon millions of packages a day and figuring out how to optimize the delivery, this is all done with AI. Figuring out how to design and lay out and manage all the robots that are automated to go pick out packages in these warehouses. This is all artificial intelligence. And we use Amazon every single day. I know I get packages at my house every day. That's just one example. So whether it's something that we speak with, whether it's something that manages daily tasks, arduous daily tasks for us on a daily basis, whether it's something like drug discovery, which, by the way, artificial intelligence is used today for accelerating drug development and discovery. And of course, as consumers, we would never see this. We would never know that it even existed. But it's across every industry. In fact, I would say, as of last year, companies that are not using artificial intelligence are at a severe disadvantage. So whether it's airlines who are not using AI to maximize their routes, whether it's the oil and gas industry to use AI to find better discovery targets, it really doesn't matter the industry. It's used everywhere. Telecommunications networks are using AI widely right now just to manage the flow of traffic over these wireless networks or even the fiber optic networks. And it's hard to express how widely artificial intelligence is being used. One particular sector that's very interesting to me, and I've invested heavily as an angel investor, are semiconductor companies that are making basically application-specific semiconductors. So these are chips that are made specifically to optimize artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what's happening is, as these companies release their new semiconductors, what happens with AI? The AI software gets better. It becomes more efficient. It becomes more powerful. And then companies around the world are capable and empowered to actually use AI to deliver better, cheaper, faster services for all of us kind of normal consumers.
And on that recording we just made, that's obviously available in the link below, you talked about this concept of, I guess you called it artificial general intelligence, and you made a comparison kind of in the medical industry where, as opposed to going to my doctor, I might go to like an AI doctor. Explain how that might work, because it's not obvious to everybody how that works, even though I think most of us would realize how inefficient it is to walk and go and get an appointment and then cough and your doctor tries to assess you. I mean, it's definitely not the most efficient process, but it's hard to believe a computer might do it better.
Today's healthcare system is very symptom-based. To use your example, you come in, you've got a cough, you go to the doctor and you ask to be treated for the cough. What is changing about healthcare is it will become outcome-based, which means what's the outcome, not just today with your cold, but over your lifetime. And what started to happen is we're starting to use artificial intelligence to take a full genomic sequence of our DNA and to use AI to figure out if there are any mutations and what those mutations might look like in terms of our human condition. And then figure out what drugs, for example, would work well with our DNA and which ones may be dangerous for us. They might actually kill us. And when we think about general practitioners or doctors who even specialize in something, they have a very limited worldview. They develop a certain set of skills to deal with certain symptoms, but they don't have the time to review all of the kind of corresponding or secondary research that may actually feed or factor into our condition of the day. Or if there's an underlying condition which actually has to do with mutations in our own DNA. And so if we can imagine taking the finest doctors on the planet, all of them, and then encapsulating that as an artificial general intelligence, which has the world's medical knowledge. It understands every single research paper that's ever been written on every condition. It understands our genetic makeup. It understands all of the drugs that have ever been produced and how they react with certain individuals. I mean, it doesn't take a leap to kind of understand that would change our healthcare and the quality of our outcomes dramatically. And that's the doctor, honestly, I want to see if something's wrong.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I mean, talk about a quantum leap in quality of life, just health, maybe longevity, all because of the technologies you're talking about with quantum computing that clicks in there, the AGI, and then you're the guy that knows the stocks, and then some of them have these countdown timers, which is something we talked about, which is even more fascinating. I'm wearing an Oura ring, and again, I'm not plugging them, but what it does is it tracks all my data all the time, and it tells me when I'm about to have a bad day. My heart rate variability starts not being what it should, and it's not always right, and sometimes I disagree because I'm like, I'm going to have a good day anyways. But it usually knows when I'm run down a bit, and I'm probably more susceptible to certain things. Imagine this at a quantum level, and then having the diagnosis in real time. I mean, it's a game changer, and it's probably available sooner than we expect because, like you said, with this exponential stuff, and it's exciting that kind of the stocks and the scenes going on behind and the angel investing that might lead to that time stock. So again, that's interesting. People can watch that video we recorded below. The last thing I want to talk about is this CRISPR technology. We hear it. Funny enough, I'd say most people know that acronym. Like I'd say, my aunt would probably drop it. Oh yeah, CRISPR, I've heard of it. A lot of people have heard of it, but Jeff, we don't really know what it's going to do. And I don't think anyone sees the connection like you do between the quantum computing, the AGI, and this CRISPR. Honestly, you just described it to me in this video, and I'm still having a hard time seeing how this is this incredible loop. Tell people, what does the CRISPR mean, and what does it mean for their lives in the future?
It is one of the most exciting technological developments in our lifetime, put very simply. We can think of it as a tool to correct mutations in our DNA. So we think about our DNA almost as if it is software code. Software code sometimes has bugs. Well, our DNA sometimes has mutations. Sometimes they're complex mutations, and sometimes they're just one single mutation. For example, something called LCA10, which is a progressive form of blindness. It's caused by one single mutation. Same thing, sickle cell anemia, beta thalassemia. And so by simply changing just a small part of our DNA, we actually empower our bodies to recover to the state that it would normally be in if we didn't have that particular mutation. So we think about CRISPR, genetic editing technology, as a method by which we can actually improve our outcomes by correcting unnatural mutations in our own DNA.
And you add that then to the quantum computing and the AGI, and how does that start taking things to an exponential level?
Yes, and so quantum computing, we can think of it like raw horsepower. So, if we give it very tough problems to solve and huge sets of DNA, for example, to analyze, and then we apply artificial intelligence running on these quantum computers to draw those connections that we would have never thought of between certain mutations and certain diseases. And then we use CRISPR as that tool to correct those mutations that we've identified with human conditions. That's how it feeds on itself. And of course, and I'm not exaggerating, every single day, the medical community, the biotechnology industry gets smarter. We start to break down and understand our DNA and those mutations for each disease. Every year, every month, we're making major breakthroughs in terms of better understanding how our DNA impacts our own health and our own condition, which is why it's so exciting. The smarter we get, it just feeds on itself, and we keep building on that knowledge, empowering biotechnology companies to really start to take on some of the most challenging diseases known to the human race.
It's an exciting time, Jeff. Are we going to live long enough to see it all happen?
Well, my goal, baseline goal, is 120, and I think I can get there.
You look good, Jeff.
People, thank you. A lot of people really think about, not just living until that age, but actually living and being healthy, being able to enjoy life, being active at 100 years old. The concept of longevity isn't new, but it's actually very powerful right now. And the advice I give to people is, if you can take really good care of yourself just for the next 5 or 10 years, you really do have a shot to live well past 100, because these advancements are going to empower us to do exactly that. In fact, I just returned a few days ago from the world's leading center of preventative and predictive medicine. It's a place in La Jolla, just outside of San Diego, called the Health Nucleus. I just got back from a 6-month visit, and they use artificial intelligence in their analysis of our own DNA, and also what we're doing in terms of therapeutic approaches to medicine. And they have a program called 100 Plus. And so their whole premise to the practice is really the future of healthcare. It's outcome based, and their whole goal is to help us live beyond 100 years. And it's something I take very seriously. It's something I practice in my daily life in terms of health, nutrition, and exercise. And I really want to be a great grandfather someday. And it's not something that just happens. You have to work at it.
Yeah, and I actually want to ask you about some of your daily routines, when we finish up here. But it's a great point you make. I mean, I actually remember my great-grandmother. When I was a kid, we used to go visit her, and I was obviously really young, and I remember her being really old, but it was an anomaly, I only had one that I remember seeing, that was still alive. And, I'm turning 50 this year, and I was talking to my daughter recently. She's 16, and I kind of made a comment like, I don't have that much time left, which is why I'm going all in on everything I do these days. And it was just interesting to hear myself say that, because, you're potentially on the other side, or are you? And that's the question. I think I had a guest here one time that said, Brian, if you treated your body like you did your very first car, I think that's what they said. You remember that old car? What we usually do is we discard them after 5 years or 10 years. But if you remember that, I used to have a 68 Mustang when I was in high school. Now,
oh boy,
at the time, that car was older than me. I was born in 71. And right now, I think that car, would be 60 years old. Imagine what that thing's like over the years, unless I really, like you said, go out of your way to proactively take care of it. I think that's the way we kind of have to visualize our bodies, and yet we don't. Most of us kind of take it for granted. And I think, I guess you could probably observe it as well. Sometimes our health's getting worse, even though the technology is getting better.
Absolutely. We at least the way I look at it is, we have to think about optimizing our own human condition. And it's a very difficult thing to do, because it's hard work to really closely monitor our intakes. And it's hard work to exercise on a regular basis. And to stay fit, it's hard work to monitor our visceral fat, for example. And you really need good guidance and good partnership with practitioners to be able to do that accurately. But we really do need to track our overall health and well-being to be able to accomplish that. If we want to live well beyond 100 years old, we actually have to understand our condition today, and we have to monitor it proactively on a regular basis.
Well, and that's why, yeah, no, it is worth it. And I want to talk about some of your routines, and maybe I'll share some of mine. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, Jeff, is because, as we've said in this other video we recorded, which is available on the link below, you want to have these biotech stocks on your radar. you kind of want to know where they are and what's happening, because this exponential growth is coming. And, you know, it's not something you want to find out after everyone else has. Like you said, after the corporate technologies own it, you want to be in early. And that's why, you know, you're offering this special free live call. It's called Time Stocks, and it's really your private briefing on something you've been watching. It's one thing to know the techs, but you also have found these fascinating countdown timers in these stocks, and it really is interesting. So again, I really implore everybody to click the link. I'll be on that live training. It's going to be an exciting night to hear you break this stuff down. Tell me about you. I mean, you know, you look pretty good, Jeff. What's your daily routines? I know you've got a black belt in martial arts. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. You know, my daily habits have improved probably exponentially in the past 6 years since I've been doing the show, because I've had some pretty cool minds on here. And when I sit down with them, I take a little bit of IP here, a little bit of IP there, and I'm healthier and stronger now than I was 10 years ago. And I know because I do this same workout that includes like 130 burpees and a shadow boxing routine. And I can actually do more than I could when I'm 40, which is fascinating. But I've done a lot of changes to my lifestyle as well. So I don't know, tell me about you. How do you view that whole equation?
Well, first of all, that's amazing. I mean, you clearly had that mindset that even as you age, you actually can do more. And it's absolutely true. I earned my third degree black belt in Shotokan Karate back in 2016. And so I was still living and working in Tokyo and training under one of the world's greatest masters, which was truly a privilege that I had. It was the hardest part about me leaving Tokyo, actually, leaving Japan, was really having to move away from my dojo. You know, it's an amazing art that's incredible for not just your well-being, your physical well-being, but also your mental well-being. It's a very peaceful place to be, and I have found it to be immensely meaningful to me in my life. Again, not just for my physical health, but for my mental health. You know, when I think start to finish, I'm an early riser. You know, it's not unusual for me to start my day working and researching at 4 a.m. and absolutely by 5 a.m. every day. And by the time 1 o'clock rolls around, you know, I've typically put in 8, sometimes 9 hours of work in. I eat very healthy breakfasts. My diet is gluten-free. It is entirely dairy-free, and I consume no animal proteins, which is hard. So I only eat fresh, wild seafood with my diet. And I take a series of healthy supplements every day. You know, my breakfasts are vegetables, a little bit of smoked salmon, and, you know, 2 eggs and some coconut yogurt. And that's typically what I eat. I have supplements morning and night that are a lot of the usual suspects. I try and sleep well, obviously, but you know, 6 or 7 hours a night is absolutely more than enough for me. And I also have a very regular exercise routine. So I tend to do cardiovascular exercise. My favorite is rowing because it uses about 86% of the muscles in your body. And I'll do that, you know, 3 days a week. And then I'll intermittently use kettlebells on off days, which I found to be just great functional strength training exercises. Definitely get your heart rate up and down with good variability, and keeps your muscle strong. It's one of the biggest mistakes. And by the way, I've got a few years on you, Brian.
Oh, really?
But it's one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we age is we let our muscle mass decrease, which is very dangerous. It's a spiral that just gets worse in time. And so, which is why just having a cardiovascular exercise is not enough. We have to engage in strength training every week to make sure that at least our muscle mass stays the same. And hopefully gets a little bit stronger, you know, a little bit denser muscle mass. It definitely improves our overall quality of life.
You know, that's not surprising when I hear your routine. And look, if some people are watching and listening to us right now and, you know, don't do these kinds of practices, it might sound like, you know, Jeff and I are weird and crazy. But I'm telling you, if you look at a high performance person, 90-some% of the time you can track it back to their daily practices. It's just true. Their mindset, their physical practice, their diet, a lot of times their gratitude practice, their affirmations, their media diets, you know, lots of things. And I teach a course in my academy where I break down all of this stuff for my students. I'm just finishing up that course. So I had to kind of re-jump into my IP, and it's such a game changer, these little things. Martial arts for me has been an absolute massive part of my life. About 20 years ago, I had my first Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. Before it became super big, it was like, I think it was UFC 38 at the time, so it was really early days. But I've trained all over the world in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and again, the spirit of those dojos is it's something very special. I've trained in Rio de Janeiro, Los Angeles, New York City, in Asia, everywhere. I took my son to his first jiu-jitsu lesson a few weeks ago, and it was special. It was special. He's 4 years old. He was actually a little bit timid to step on the dojo floor because, you show up, it's this big open space. He's wearing a gi for the first time, and there's all these people. But he got out there, and they do a great job with the kids there. And it's Hodger Gracie here, and he does a great job. And it's a journey I want my boys to be a part of because it gave me so much, like you said, mentally, spiritually, physically. I've never had to use my jiu-jitsu, but I could. And to know that I could, but I choose not to, and I use it as a way of life. It's amazing. So it's great to hear, and not surprising, Jeff, that you're a fan of that. And it's interesting you say about the plant-based diet. I actually got challenged to run an Ironman 70.3 about 3 years ago on a plant-based diet. So I went plant-based for a year, and I made a whole movie about it. And it was a grueling but fascinating experience. And I got to see what. It's great to change your game a little and find out what foods. It drove my wife crazy, but she started making amazing things, with these limitations. And, I've come to find some way between those two diets that works for me. But, yeah, it's no surprise that you've got a lot of that IP, Jeff, and it seems to be working well for you. Question for you. What are you doing in 10 years? What does your world look like?
I'm so conflicted, especially being a father, because, as a father, I want every day to go slowly. So I maximize the time with I have two boys, two young boys.
How old are they?
They're 8 and 10.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I want as much of them as I can before, they move on and become adults or teenagers for that matter. But then I cannot wait to wake up every day to see what's happening in the world of technology and biotechnology and, of course, investing. And so I can't wait to get to 2028, which is the year that I predict we'll have artificial general intelligence. And that's really only 7 years away. It's not far. Later this year, we're going to see regular space flights for normal citizens, for normal consumers. This is the birth of space travel, space tourism. It's happening this year. And so, I think our world, our travel will be entirely different. There will be hypersonic travel to get from London to Tokyo in a fraction of the time. Of course, the medical advances will just be unheard of. We have a real shot, especially with genetic editing technology, to cure thousands of diseases that have never had a cure. And so there's so much to look forward to because of all these technological developments. And honestly, I mentioned earlier, I've been an investor since I was 16 years old. And I've never been more excited about being an investor than I am right now. I often refer to this decade as kind of the year of biotech. It's the year that biotech transforms not just from kind of like a laboratory and wet works and pipettes, but actually, a quantum computing, supercomputer fueled, artificial intelligence empowered industry where it's going to start to move. It is moving actually at the pace beyond Moore's law. It's happening that quickly, and we've never seen this before. So, this will be the decade of biotechnology, when biotechnology is really more like high tech. And it's growing at the same speed. And so there's just so many incredible opportunities right now. Every day is exciting. Every day brings new developments. And it's just a lot of fun right now.
Yeah, I can feel it, man. I can feel how excited you are, and it makes me excited as well. And so, look, I just want to thank you for giving my viewers an opportunity to learn from you and this whole concept you have of time stocks and these three really fascinating areas between the quantum computing, the AGI, and as well as the CRISPR. Again, there's a link below, londonreal.tv/Jeff. It's going to be a live call, and you're going to be breaking down a way they can make at least $74,000. It's one last question I wanted to ask you, Jeff. For people that are new to investing, or people that have invested before but don't have that much experience, I'm wondering, what's the kind of advice you give, even from a psychological perspective, when someone goes to invest? And, maybe some of your martial arts training will help here, because, a lot of people, when they get into a fight, everything goes out the window. The preparation goes, they get emotional, they're in the moment. And somehow I feel like sometimes stock trading is the same. I remember my first couple weeks on Wall Street, and I made all the wrong decisions. You're supposed to buy low and sell high, and yet human nature makes us do the opposite, right? We try to save our losers, and we cut our winners too close. Any thoughts on a philosophy for someone who might be new to this game or just new to investing? How do you approach it? How do you teach your sons about something like this?
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic, and your analogy of martial arts to investing is actually very simple. I mentioned earlier, for me, the dojo is a very peaceful place. Even when you're sparring or competing, and it's very dangerous, I find it's when my brain is at a perfect state of calm, where I'm completely present and focused on just one simple task. And I'm always the best when my mind is clear and not thinking about anything else. And it's very hard to do in investing. Why? Well, because it's your money, right? And you're worried about it. You want your wealth to increase, but you're worried that it might decrease. And so that causes us to do very irrational things, to your point. And so, of course, one of the things that I always caution is position sizing. So, and understanding the importance of developing a portfolio of great companies with fantastic growth prospects. One of the first mistakes that so many people do is that they get in love with an individual stock and they just think that's the one. And they go overboard on that stock. And inevitably, that might be the stock that actually crashes, and it has a devastating impact, financial impact, number one, which is short-term, and it can cloud their judgment for the rest of their life. It can literally hold them back from creating wealth for themselves and their families. So I really hate to see that happen. And so a big part of my role at Brownstone Research is to help educate investors on how to be smart about your approach to investing. Never go all in on one stock. Develop a healthy, balanced portfolio of fabulous companies. And then, of course, what me and my team do is we monitor those positions every day. And if you can use that kind of investment research in the right way, it kind of takes the emotion out of, when do I buy and when do I sell? The other aspect that we touched on is valuation. And that is, again, we should never buy a stock just because we like the product. We like how the food tastes, or, we think that is cool, or, we think that network is functioning really well. It's completely irrelevant. It's arbitrary. What's the overall value of the company? Is it trading at 100 times earnings? Well, I can guarantee you that if it's trading at 100 times earnings or 100 times sales, which is what we're seeing right now in some companies, you're going to lose almost all your money. I can guarantee it. Those levels will never be sustained. But if you find a fabulous company that's very high growth and only trading at 4 or 5 times sales, that's an undervalued company. It has amazing potential to double, triple, quadruple your money over time. And so I really try to help investors understand how important valuation is, and that we should understand the value that we're investing at, not just the nominal price of the stock, of the share price. There's a big difference.
Very well said. You clearly studied corporate finance at London Business School, and this comes out. And again, what did Steve Jobs say? You can understand your life in reverse. You connect the dots in reverse. And I think I'm seeing all the little bits that got you to where you are today, which is, one of the best when it comes to picking these incredible, technology stocks. And, for me, I focus on what I'm good at, which is doing what I do here. And I get the experts like you in to advise me on how to invest. And so I appreciate the time today. I appreciate the fact that you're allowing my viewers and listeners at London Real here to get a sneak peek into what you see of these timed stocks and the special live call you're doing. Again, if people want to go learn more about that and sign up, it's londonreal.tv/Jeff. And we'll be talking about a lot of these issues, but how they manifest into stocks, real assets that you can own. And great investment advice from Jeff. I really appreciate that. Gordon Gekko said it. Never get emotional about stock, right? It clouds your judgment. And then Bud Fox said it back to Gordon when he was getting emotional about stock. And so you don't, it's the wrong way to do it. You want to pick, like you said, companies that have those ratios that you said and have a portfolio of those. Over time, you'll see that value. And it's great advice. So if people are new to investing or they really want to get in on this biotech decade you're talking about, and I agree, this is an exciting decade. Make me want to move back to California at this rate. But it's exciting, so people should join us. Again, really appreciate you, Jeff. Appreciate your expertise. And thanks so much for the time today. I look forward to the live training. And let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Great fun.
All right, take care. Bye.